The AFC's number one seed Baltimore Ravens are preparing to take on Josh Allen and company this coming fall. What's the state of their roster? How do the Bills match up with them as things stand today? We are continuing our series on the Bills' opponents this 2024 NFL season. Hello everyone and welcome to Buffalo Live, your one-stop shop for live professional play-by-play reaction to every Buffalo Bills game, plus discussion on the Bills' opponents this coming season, including Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you so much for watching today. On today's show, we are going to really do a deep dive into this Ravens team. I've spent hours looking into every area of this team's offense and defense, and really excited to share my thoughts. And I also want to quickly react and kind of put a pin on this MVS signing, because I really loved the addition there of Marquez, Valdes-Scantling. So some final thoughts on that. But if you're just joining us, we are doing a series on the Bills' opponents. We just had an episode come out last week that dug into the Kansas City Chiefs. And so today we will obviously focus on the Ravens. The next show will be focused on the Detroit Lions. So those are the Bills' three special opponents. And then we'll dig into the divisions they're facing, the AFC South, NFC West, and the AFC East, obviously. So let's dig in, and before we again get to the Ravens, just a final reaction to MVS. I loved this signing. I really felt before the Bills signed MVS that they were missing that final piece, a guy who was quality depth as a boundary receiver. You know, we've heard a lot about Keon Coleman and what he brings to the table and what his deficits are as a receiver. And so I think having a guy you can have on the outside who has a floor of at least 300 yards, you know, I think I could definitely see MVS maybe reaching that 500-yard goal. That would be awesome. There's a lot of receivers on this team, a lot of guys getting the ball, tight ends, running backs, right? But it would be awesome if MVS even had, 300, 350 yards for this team. That tells me that he's coming in at spots where maybe Coleman's being subbed out. Maybe we're wanting to throw the ball deep, vertical routes, stretching the field. Maybe it's late in the game. Loved this signing for that deep shot, explosive, fast boundary receiver, a veteran for Keon Coleman to learn from. I think the final piece to this wide receiver puzzle has been found. Credit to Joe Marino for this point he made on his podcast. You brought up the Gabe Davis contract, right? And what he made with the Jaguars. And I don't remember what the contract was, but I know it was double digits. And so would you rather have Gabe Davis for that double-digit contract, or would you rather have Marquez Valdes-Scantling for $1.5 million? For me, that's a clear answer. That's MVS for the $1 million. Now, Davis did average 682 yards a season while he was here in Buffalo, but how much of that was him benefiting from being on an offense with Josh Allen? We'll see how he does in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, and but I'm really excited for MVS and what kind of floor he brings to this offense. All right, now let's get into the focus of today's episode, the Baltimore Ravens. The Bills are playing at Baltimore Week 4 Sunday Night Football against the Ravens. Sean McDermott's all-time head coaching record against John Harbaugh and the Ravens is 2-2. Last matchup, Week 4 of the 2022 season, ended in a 23-20 win for the Bills. If you remember, it was in Baltimore, rainy conditions. The Bills were down 20-3 late in the second quarter before they went on to score 20 unanswered points. And this is one of my favorite games because, if you remember, late in the fourth quarter, the Ravens are tied with the Bills. They're at the Bills' 1-yard line. 3 tries they have at the 1-yard line. Eventually, on fourth down, it's picked off by Jordan Poyer in the end zone. The Bills concoct a genius time management focused drive to go all the way down the field. Tyler Bass makes a 21-yard chip shot as time expires. It was really an amazing job by Ken Dorsey and Sean McDermott, Josh Allen in conducting that game-winning drive. So that was the last time these two teams matched up. Last year, the Ravens, 13-4. They won the AFC North. They were the number one seed in the AFC's playoffs. They had the most wins in the NFL with 13. And they lost in the AFC Championship game to the eventual Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. So there was your Ravens year last year. Now let's talk about the Ravens offense. I'm going to talk about the offense and the notable changes that they've had this offseason. Then I'll talk about the defense, do the same thing. And then I'll close the show with, some final comments. So, Ravens offense, number one in rushing yards. They average 156 rushing yards per game. First in the NFL, 21st in passing yards per game, 229 yards a game. Fourth in points per game. They averaged a touchdown a quarter, 28 points a game. Not many teams averaged more points than these Ravens. And that was in large part due to their MVP quarterback, Lamar Jackson, took home the coveted trophy last year. He also won it in 2019. First team All-Pro. Let's talk about his arm. Sixth in completion percentage. 67.2% of his passes were caught among quarterbacks who played at least 10 games. Now, something I did find interesting, and listen, I don't know the ins and outs of how they had this metric done, but according to Pro Football Reference, Jackson's bad throw percentage was 16.6%. So 16.6% of his throws were bad, according to Pro Football Reference. That was the 10th worst. That puts him next to guys like Joshua Dobbs and Will Levis last year. Now, his on-target percentage, 73.9%, and that was 8th worst. So, according to Pro Football Reference, not exactly the most accurate guy, but again, if you look at just his generic completion percentage, 67.2, I think that's in large part due to guys on their team with wide catch radiuses like Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, Odell Beckham Jr. last year. Only had 24 passing touchdowns. That was tied for 11th in the NFL. Only 7 interceptions. No team in the NFL had fewer interceptions than these Baltimore Ravens. So it's interesting. You've got some stats here that suggest he's not so accurate, then you've got others that suggest he is accurate. And then also we have some strange pressure stats. His pressure percentage, this is times Jackson was pressured per drop back, was 15.7%. That was 4th best, okay? So not an O-line that had their quarterback pressured too much. However, 38 sacks against, 9th most in the NFL. He had 5 games last year where he was sacked 4 times, including that AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. So it's interesting. You've got a team that offensively runs the ball super well, doesn't give up too many pressures. You wonder what kind of trouble Jackson is putting himself in as a scrambler. He had 65 scrambles. That was number 1 in the NFL. No quarterback scrambled more than Lamar Jackson on his dropbacks. So let's talk about his legs, speaking of. 821 rushing yards from Lamar Jackson. That was 22nd in the NFL. For reference, Josh Allen had 524 rushing yards, so about 300 less rushing yards. And Allen was 43rd in the NFL. So Jackson, incredible with what he does as a runner. Averaged 5.5 yards per carry. Josh Allen, meanwhile, averaged 4.7 yards per carry, so almost a full yard more. Only had 5 rushing touchdowns, so he's not used like Josh Allen is in the red zone. They're not going to do the tush push the way that the Bills are with Jackson. Jackson, though, one last thought on him as a player. 13 game-winning drives last year. Number one in the NFL. No one led their team on more game-winning drives than Lamar Jackson. So in conclusion, not an elite passer, but an elite rusher. So when the Bills play the Ravens week 4, they will have to contain Jackson as a runner. The best QB legs that the Bills played last year, well, if you look at the yardage numbers, it was Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. When the Bills played the Eagles last season, Hurts had 14 carries for 65 yards, 2 touchdowns. If I'm not mistaken, I think both of them were tush pushes. So they held Hurts to 4.6 average yards per carry. Not great compared to what they held Mahomes to in their 2 games that they played against the Chiefs. 3.5 carries per game for Mahomes, 13.5 yards per game between these Chiefs and the Bills, and 0 touchdowns. So they really held Mahomes. Mahomes, no one really thinks of him as in that same tier of running quarterbacks as Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. But those were the best running quarterbacks they played last year. So let's talk about this running back room. You had Gus Edwards last year. He saw his contract expire. He's now with Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers. He led the team in carries with 198, 810 yards. That did not lead the team because Lamar Jackson led his team, but he did lead the running back room. 4.1 average yards per carry, not super great. 13 touchdowns, though, was really good. That was tied for 5th in the NFL. Gus Edwards led the team last year in rushing touchdowns. Keaton Mitchell, the rookie last year, undrafted free agent, tore his ACL in Week 15, unfortunately. Averaged 8.4 yards per carry. That was first among running backs with 45-plus carries. And the reason I have that as the qualifier is the guy did have a smaller sample size. Only had 47 carries, played in 8 games, but man, when he had those carries, he was explosive. Justice Hill also in the backfield, 4.6 average yards per carry. That was great as well. So the Ravens, you don't have any super flashy names there. You will have one this year. We'll get into that later. But they did a decent job. Now let's talk about the receiving weapons for this Ravens team last year. They had Zay Flowers, rookie, excellent year, 858 yards, led the team, 39th in the NFL, so that put him between guys like Deebo Samuel and Jacoby Myers. 77 receptions, again, that led the team, 28th in the NFL. So they definitely found a great first-round pick from Zay Flowers. So that's who Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford, who will be lining up against this Week 4 matchup. Mark Andrews missed 7 games last year due to a cracked fibula on that Logan Wilson tackle, which I think may or may not have inspired that hip drop tackle rule, although I think they came out and said that was not actually an applicable example. So I don't know, but he averaged 54 yards per game, would have had 925 yards in 17 games, and that's good for a top 5 tight end in the league. So Mark Andrews, 28 years old this year, still playing like a top 5 tight end. Fortunately for him, missed some games. And then you've also got Isaiah Likely, who had a great season coming in for Andrews when he was injured. I think he had 400-plus yards, if I'm not mistaken. So 2 great tight ends. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens run a lot of 12 personnel, 22 personnel, keep those tight ends on the field, run the ball. That's what their strength is, and that's what it was last year. Nelson Agholor, Rashod Bateman, those are your other 2 wide receivers. Agholor turns 31 this offseason. The last season he had with 500-plus yards, 4 years ago, 2020. Rashod Bateman, first-round pick out of the 2021 NFL Draft. His best season was his rookie season when he had 515 yards. He only has 4 career touchdowns. He's had injuries throughout his entire career. One note on him, though, I did see he charted very well in PFF separation grade. So this is a guy that although you haven't seen him produce too much, the Baltimore Ravens organization really thinks they've got something there, so that's why they signed him to a contract extension. Now let's look at one piece I want to mention on the offensive line is Ronnie Stanley there. Started most amount of games last year since 2019. He started in 13. So he's never had a fully healthy season since he's been in the NFL. That's Stanley's problem, but when he does play, the consensus is that he's excellent. So that's who Greg Rousseau or A.J. Epinesa, Von Miller, that's the guy that they will be taking on more than likely in Week 4. So notable changes this offseason. I already brought up Bateman's contract extension. Gus Edwards were brought up as well. He's gone. Keaton Mitchell coming back from the ACL injury. Will he be healthy by Week 4? We'll see. No doubt the biggest addition to this Ravens team was the signing of running back Derrick Henry, 2 years, $16 million deal. That made him the 6th most expensive running back as far as total cash goes. He was second last year in rushing yards, second the year before as well. If you look at his average yards per carry, 4.2 average yards per carry was good for 22nd in the NFL among running backs with 100-plus yards. Not great. The Titans really fed Henry the ball. They always did while he was there. And he was a consistent producer, you know. He had, I think, a year or two where he averaged more than 5 yards per carry. But these past 3 seasons, it's been around that 4.3, 4.4 area. So, yeah, let's see. The last season that he had, you know, that 5-plus average yards per carry stat line was 2020, so 4 years ago. He's 30 years old now, so definitely aging, but the Ravens are hoping to get 2 quality years out of him from this contract. The Ravens release wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. Last year he played in 14 games, so he missed 3 games. 35 receptions, was second on the team in receiving yards, 565 yards there, and only 3 touchdowns. He does have a $4.0 million cap hit this year with his the void year they put on his deal. So the Ravens still paying him that money. They draft wide receiver Devontez Walker out of UNC. So they're hoping this guy can, if Bateman doesn't develop or if Agholor starts to show signs of regression, they're hoping that Devontez Walker can kind of slot in there if they are going to run, 11 personnel or a spread offense there. So offensive line-wise, lots of departures here. And this is where I think the Bills can really tear this team apart. They lose guard Kevin Simpson to free agency. He goes to the Jets. He played 99.4% of snaps. That led the entire team. They also lose their other guard opposite Tyler Linderbaum, the center there. Kevin Zeitler goes to Detroit in free agency. He played 87% of the snaps. They traded away Morgan Moses, the right tackle, to the Jets. So the Jets actually end up with 2 former Ravens offensive linemen. They draft, in those guys' absence, they draft offensive tackle Roger Rosengarten out of Washington in the 2nd round. Could potentially play guard. So we'll see what happens there. And then you've also got left guard Andrew Vorhees, who took a redshirt year last year. He was injured during the 2023 NFL Combine, tore his ACL. So he was projected to be a 3rd-round pick, drops all the way to the 7th round. So the Ravens are hoping that he'll be healthy this season and that he can reach that ceiling that he was projected to have coming out of USC. So there's a wide overview of this Ravens offense and what it's looking like. Now let's dig into this defense. An excellent defense last year, was ranked 6th in yards per game given up, 6th in passing yards per game given up, 14th in rushing yards per game. So they actually averaged 1 yard less than Buffalo's defense. So if there is a sore spot to the Ravens defense, or maybe that's not the right way to put it, but it's a team that's more vulnerable to the run than the pass. They ranked first in points allowed per game. They only allowed 16.5 points per game. They were second in red zone percentage. So listen to this. Out of all the trips that the opponents of the Ravens took to the Ravens red zone, only 40.8% ended in a touchdown. So if you're a team playing the Ravens, you reach the red zone, you're thinking, all right, great, we've got a shot here to score a touchdown. More than likely, more than not, you are not going to. That's how good this defense was. 40.8% was second in the NFL. First in turnover differential, 12-plus turnover differential. 18 interceptions was tied for second with the Buffalo Bills, actually. 13 fumble recoveries, tied for second in the NFL. And then total takeaways, tied for first with the New York Giants. Some strange pressure stats here as well. 25th in the pressure percentage rate. That's when you talk about pressures, that's hurries, quarterback knockdowns, and sacks. So that's all three of those combined. 19.5% of dropbacks ended in a pressure. So that's not great, actually. That was 25th in the NFL. 28th in hurries. So that's when a quarterback throws the ball earlier than intended or is chased out of the pocket. So you take those two stats and you think, well, maybe this defensive line wasn't that great. Excuse me. Juxtapose that with the fact that this team led the NFL in sacks. They had 60 sacks. So when they did get to the quarterback, they sacked him. All right? Let's talk about some key guys to highlight here. Number one, this guy is one of the best linebackers in the league, if not the best. Roquan Smith, an all-pro last year, 158 tackles, was good for sixth in the NFL. This guy was all over the field. You watch him play. He shoots through the line of scrimmage, avoids blockers, really good tackler. Love how this guy plays. Kyle Hamilton, safety, first round, 14th overall pick in the 2020 NFL draft, or the 2022 NFL draft. An all-pro Pro Bowler last year, 4 interceptions, 7 tackles for a loss. And get this is my favorite stat of his. He was number 1 in the NFL in pass rating allowed when targeted. 38.4 was the passer rating for quarterbacks that targeted wide receivers Kyle Hamilton was covering. That is insane. So no surprise why he earned those honors that he did. This guy is amazing. How about Justin Madubuike on the defensive line? The defensive tackle there was his second-team All-Pro last year. 13 sacks. That was 9th most in the NFL. 33 pressures and 12 tackles for a loss. That led the team. So most of that production that this defensive line saw was from Justin Madubuike. Hope I'm pronouncing his name right there. A note on cornerback Brandon Stevens, fourth-year man out of SMU. He was targeted the third most out of the entire NFL. 108 targets. Played 93% of the snaps, but in those targets, he gave up a 63% completion percentage. Not great for a cornerback, but when you take that huge, massive sample size, I think you have to live with that. And so we'll see if the Bills try and target him when they match up in Week 4. Notable changes this offseason to this defense. Starts with the defensive coordinator. Mike McDonald leaves for the head coaching vacancy at Seattle. Zach Orr, the inside linebacker coach these past 2 seasons, the guy who was the direct coach for Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith, is now your defensive coordinator over at Baltimore. Easy to see why. Those 2 linebackers, man, they've been amazing these past 2 seasons. Defensive line-wise, Jadeveon Clowney sees his contract expire. He gets a 2-year deal from the Carolina Panthers, but he had 9.5 sacks last year, tied his career high. And so to replace him, the Ravens draft edge rusher Adisa Isaac out of Penn State in the 3rd round. We'll see if he can compete for a starting job there. Linebackers, speaking of Patrick Queen, the Ravens lose Patrick Queen to free agency. He goes over to the division rivals Pittsburgh Steelers. Second team All-Pro, 133 total tackles. That was 17th in the NFL. So you've got two linebackers last year who were in the top 17 in terms of total tackles for the entire NFL. That's insane. These guys were high contributors on their defense. Former first-round pick. So this is a top three linebacker duo being split up. And I really think that the Bills can take advantage of whoever is filling in there. So we'll see. Secondary-wise, you see Geno Stone, the safety there. His contract expires. He had 7 interceptions last year. That was second in the NFL. He goes over to division rival Cincinnati Bengals. The Ravens draft cornerback Nate Wiggins out of Clemson in the first round. He was the fastest cornerback in the draft, ran a 4.28 40-yard dash. That's insane. Great stop ability, not super great at tackling and run support. They also draft cornerback TJ Tampa in the 4th round out of Iowa State. And I wanted to mention this guy because Matt Miller out of ESPN, his comp for Tampa was Kyer Elam. Lanky corner with good measurables. We'll see if he can compete for a starting job on the team. So that is your defense for the Baltimore Ravens at a glance. Now I want to talk about some question marks, some exclamation points, and what I really think the Bills' game plan needs to be when they take on these Ravens. So the question mark is, can the offense stick with 12 personnel, especially when they're down in a game, right? This is a team that is built to play ahead. Great rushing offense. Great pass defense. But when OBJ is gone and you don't necessarily want to trot out Patrick Ricard and Isaiah Likely onto the field, and you've got to have Bateman, you've got to have Agholor, you've got to have Devontez Walker, what kind of offense are we going to see? So that's one question mark. I really don't think they've got a great supporting cast at wide receiver beyond Zay Flowers. Sorry. So that's one question mark on the offense. How about the offensive line? Outside of Tyler Linderbaum, I think there is a question mark for each of these guys. Ronnie Stanley, because how healthy is he going to be? Is he going to play half the season? Is he going to get 13 games? We'll see. How about Andrew Vorhees? Never played a snap in the NFL. What kind of player are we going to see from him? Is he going to be, that quality starter that he was projected to be as a third rounder, or, is that injury going to really hamper him? And when is he going to be healthy? That's another question. Ben Cleveland, likely to start at right guard to start the season. Could be, I think it's Patrick McCarry is his name. But if it's Cleveland, he played 14% of snaps last season, so not a whole lot. And then right tackle, is probably going to be Roger Rosengarten. So we'll see how this offensive line shapes up, but I do think there are question marks around it. So, is this running production going to be as much this season with a lot of turnover? We'll see. Exclamation points for this team. Defensively, it's so easy to see. Roquan Smith, Justin Madubuike, Kyle Hamilton. I think those guys are exclamation points. On offense, you've got Lamar Jackson and his legs. You've got Tyler Linderbaum, who's a stalwart center. Those, I think, are the exclamation points for this Ravens team. So game planning-wise, given all that, I really think the Bills need to make a concerted effort to get the lead first and maintain it. That is obviously the game plan for any game, but specifically really focusing in on that first drive that the Bills offense has and putting a lot of attention to it during the game planning phase ahead of the game. So you're playing a team that is built to stick with a lead. Why not grab it first? That will really throw off, I think, what the Ravens try to do week to week. Target that linebacker opposite Roquan Smith. I think that is kind of their weak point of the entire defense. So if that's Khalil Shakir, if that's Curtis Samuel, if that's Keon Coleman, really trying to expose him there. I mean, more than likely it's going to be Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid really manned up on him. So I would definitely try and target him, whoever it is. Force those safeties to really come up and play shallow. Something that Tom Brady was so good at doing when he was obviously with the Patriots was he was patient. He was patient with the other team's defense. And so he would take the checkdowns, throw it shallow, but he was so great at noticing when the safeties were starting to come up and play him shallow, and that's when he would throw it deep. So that's what I want to see Josh Allen in this offense do. So once you grab that lead, run the ball well. This, again, is a defense that ranked 14th in the NFL in rush defense. So would love to see the Bills get that lead and then have schemes ready to trot out against the defense and run it well with guys like James Cook and Ray Davis and Josh Allen, not to mention. Defensively, you got to contain Lamar Jackson. Force him to throw. Force him to use his arm. Don't want to use his legs. And that's where I think a guy like Cole Bishop and Taron Johnson are so key. You can swap between pressure looks on Jackson, QB spies on Jackson, and tight end responsibilities. I think Cole Bishop is really a guy who the Bills drafted, and he's just a perfect player to play against a team built like the Baltimore Ravens. Physical, run defender, great at matching up against tight ends. That's exactly how these Ravens love to play. So that is going to do it for this edition of Buffalo Live. Like if you enjoyed, comment. What do you think about this Baltimore Ravens team? What scares you about them? What do you think their weaknesses are? Where do you think the Bills can take advantage? Subscribe if you want to see more. Next up, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Detroit Lions. So that should be fun. But I want to thank you for watching on behalf of Buffalo Live. Appreciate you guys. Go Bills, and God bless.